Kidnapped, jailed, sentenced to death. India wants Kulbhushan Jadhav back. Pakistan's betrayal exposed to the world. All eyes on the International Court of Justice. Only channel with reports from the ground.
As the case of Kulbhushan Jadhav moves into the International Court of Justice, WION gives you minute-by-minute updates.
As the case of Kulbhushan Jadhav moves to the International Court of Justice, WION brings you minute-by-minute coverage from Pakistan.
From Delhi's South Block, I'll bring you every detail of India's effort to save Kulbhushan Jadhav.
Justice for Jadhav. Only on WION.
Welcome everyone, I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for watching. WION continues coverage right here for Justice for Jadhav. We start this hour with about 15 minutes left before the Pakistani side continues to deliberate and provide their side of the story. But first we want to talk about the Pakistani media and how they're covering the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. They've been covering it extensively, just like they have here in India. Geo News says the Indian side is focusing too much on the fairness of Jadhav's trial in Pakistan, saying that the jailed Indian national was not allowed to meet his mother and that Pakistan is just not showing enough mercy. The Indian delegation, according to Geo, has 5 members, but Pakistan has 6, including a European lawyer. Pakistan's government officials say the raw agent's confession of espionage activities inside Pakistan will be the crux of Pakistan's case. We'll hear from them in just about 15 minutes when we'll cut in live and listen into reaction there. Pakistan is now calling Jadhav a terrorist, not a spy, and playing up his confession. Sources say that India has 4 months to prepare for the case, but Geo News says Pakistan only had days because of New Delhi's surprise move to approach the International Court of Justice. So that is how Pakistan's media is playing all of this out. And now joined by Aisha Sindhu, joining us live from the WION newsroom on the very latest. Quite a different story between India and the way Pakistan is covering this high-profile case. Aisha, what's the latest you're hearing?
Oh, absolutely, Archit. You broke it down really nicely for us, but it just goes to show that a sort of smear campaign has been launched against Kulbhushan Jadhav when it comes to Pakistan, and not surprisingly, statements about what his role really is. Now, remember when we first heard of Kulbhushan Jadhav's apprehension in Balochistan, it was on charges of espionage. Now, that entire tactic has changed completely now following India's opening arguments at the ICJ earlier this morning. He's now being touted as a spy, not just by the Pakistani media, but what we are hearing as a terrorist, rather, pardon me. What we're hearing also from our sources is that that is the likely defense that Pakistan is going to take when it comes to their right to reply later this evening. As you're pointing out, just 15 minutes away now. They're likely going to, build up on this whole thing of the confession, the alleged confession that's taken place on videotape. Also talking about the fact that he was engaged in subversive and now terrorist activities is what we're hearing, is how Pakistan is going to try and pivot the case away from India. But remember, Harish Salve, India's counsel, pointing out earlier today that the fact that India has not been granted consular access to Jadhav only complicates the issue further, because there's no real reason to understand or no real way to understand whether he's received any sort of legal counsel during these supposed confessions that have taken place and what Pakistan is sort of holding him accountable for. Back to you, Archit.
All right, Aisha, thank you for all of those updates. Let me now go to senior international correspondent Padma Rao, joining us here in the studio in New Delhi. Padma, quite a high-profile case for the Kulbhushan Jadhav case, both in India as well as Pakistan. This is not just something for one person, not just for Kulbhushan Jadhav, but also India's pride, if you like to call it, at stake at the international level. How do you think all of this is going to play out in about 10 minutes when we hear Pakistan's side? What do we make of this?
Well, look, at the international level, I think India can quite comfortably say that India is far better positioned than Pakistan. And, you know, using the operative word being terrorist, which was used by the Pakistanis about Jadhav, you know, that is the operative word. Pakistan is seen as the hotbed of terrorism, as the mothership of terrorism. So there is, you know, I mean, it's highly unlikely that the international community is suddenly going to turn around and accept that a man who has actually no blood on his hands can be labeled a terrorist. For the same reason, I find it very hard to believe that there could be any court of justice in the world that would say go ahead with a death sentence just merely based upon a one-sided verdict by a military court, you know, which might, you know, which is often seen in European countries as almost that of a banana republic because of Pakistan having degraded its own position in the eyes of the international community through its sponsorship of terrorism. So I don't really see how, you know, unless there is proof that Jadhav picked up a gun and killed, you know, 20 people or something like that, God forbid. I mean, that is the kind of proof that any court of justice would require to actually, you know, acquiesce and say that, yes, this man is a terrorist.
Right.
So therefore, I rule out, you know, I really rule out Pakistan being able to elevate its position in the eyes of the international community. And I also almost rule out any court of justice in the world saying, oh, yes, this is a case for a death sentence.
And I was going to ask you really quickly, does it really matter who went first? I mean, India did go first. They brought this up at the international level. They've already given their side 90 minutes. Pakistan about to go in the next few minutes, of course. When they start, we'll cut in. Does one side have an advantage over the other? Does it really matter that India went ahead or not really? Because whatever the statement they're going to make, they're going to have to still make it in front of the...
Well, I think, you know, I may not be entirely correct in this, in my assessment, but I think that the country or the state that approaches the court gets to go first. I think that's how I read it. So had Pakistan been the one to approach the court, then Pakistan would have gone first. Having said that, Ajit, I'm sure you're aware that the ICJ also has a rule that two states have to approach it. You know, you cannot have one state approaching it and, you know, the other state. There has to be sort of an agreement between two disputing states caught in a dispute that we will jointly approach the ICJ. And the third thing is the ICJ, like the United Nations that governs it, is pretty much of, I mean, at least from my old cynical perspective, it hasn't really come up with many. I mean, if you look at the case of, you know, in Yugoslavia, there's been this case of Ratko Mladic for, you know, in the Srebrenica massacres. This has been going on for 20 years. So this is, you know, it's just, there are these, you know, lumbering judicial processes that have just been sort of dangling in the air. And over and above all that is the Security Council of the UN. So any of those 5 states with veto powers can actually veto any decision taken by the ICJ. So I think it's a toothless body.
All right, let's actually listen into a part of what happened earlier on this afternoon. Let's listen into part of that reaction. Harish Salve presenting India's side for about 90 minutes. Again, Pakistan about to take the stage in a few minutes. Let's listen into what India had to say.
Where a national of one country is being tried in another country, adherence in letter and spirit to the Vienna Convention becomes a vital step. Mr. President and esteemed members of the court, I say with all the emphasis at my command, the graver the charge is, the greater the need for punctilious adherence to the convention. Although the Vienna Convention predates the ICCPR, international law and its jurisprudence, especially in the dimensions of human rights, have evolved with time, and the interpretation of the Vienna Convention and the implication of the rights guarantees must be informed by current standards of conduct expected from sovereign states. The Vienna Convention embodies a vital code of conduct that would give life and meaning to the right to fair trial to a national of one state arrested in another state. The content of Article 36 of Vienna Convention in the present times must be informed by international jurisprudence, which includes the salubrious principles recognized by ICCPR.
And of course, here at WION, we are providing you global perspective on this story, covering all angles of this. Of course, our correspondent Mandy Clark is on the ground at The Hague. In fact, she's got an exclusive interview with India's lawyer Harish Salve. Let's listen into that part of the interview.
I didn't see the proceedings. You people saw the proceedings.
We were happy with it, sir, but very clearly you've kept all the points that you wanted to make before the court.
Satisfied your curiosity, I hope. You wanted to know what is it that I'm going to argue?
Mr. Salve, why did you choose to come to this court? You always challenge, India always challenge the court jurisdiction on Commonwealth countries.
You heard it for 1.5 hours, that's why.
Right. So,
what was your most important argument?
All of them.
What do you expect from this case? What do you hope for?
Justice.
Justice, and how would that translate? An annulment of the execution or just a stay?
Well, for the present, it's only for provisional measures.
But Pakistan has been making this case that they
Of course, that was Harish Salve presenting India's side. Again, both sides have 90 minutes to present their case. India has already gone. Pakistan, any moment, will take the stage at The Hague there in Netherlands. Let me go back to senior international correspondent Padma Rao with regard to this. Padma, is this really a cat and mouse game between the two countries using this Kulbhushan Jadhav case to talk about maybe a bigger problem between the two South Asian neighbors? I mean, why so much interest in this case specifically?
Well, I think it's, the interest in this case has come because India very cleverly took it to the ICJ. And I think that's a smart move because that if nothing else comes out of it, it will draw international attention. And we all know what that means when there is international attention drawn upon India and Pakistan over such a matter. Then we all know who stands to gain. It is India. I mean, that is the way of the world today. That is how international justice seems to function, for good, bad or indifferent. And this is a court which has 123 members. You know, that's not even all the nations of the earth.
Right.
For instance, China, the United States is frequently not even turned up. So that just goes to show how much disdain many countries hold this court in. So I think, yes, a cat and mouse game, certainly, but who started the cat and mouse game? The cat and mouse game was begun by Pakistan by making this man a scapegoat and for using him possibly to extricate, some sort of a deal or some sort of a force Pakistan to talk, as Surya was saying, India to talk, as Surya was saying.
Right.
On the other hand, maybe it's even, just to use him as a last-minute sort of, I don't know, toffee, to say that, all right, here, you can take him back and look how great we are, to sort of improve its own profile on the international, in the international arena.
Right.
And I think by India going to the ICJ, if nothing else, and I think the Indian government is very well aware of that, is really primarily to draw international attention and, for Pakistan to see itself sort of highlighted again as a dodgy state, with a few credentials.
True credentials, all right, of course, and we did hear what Pakistan's angle, how Pakistani media is covering. In fact, you're taking a live look at visuals inside The Hague right now. Any moment, Pakistan will take the stand there, presenting their side over the next 90 minutes. Of course, we will cut in and let you listen in once that starts. So that could be any moment now for about 90 minutes. Pakistan presenting its side of the story. Pakistani media, from what we are seeing, is saying that, India had months to prepare for this, taking it to the international level, but Pakistan just had days. India having 5 members in its delegation, Pakistan having 6, including a European lawyer. A little bit of a background for perspective on the story. Jadhav kidnapped from Iran back in 2016 and then brought to Pakistan, presented as an Indian spy. India's lawyer Harish Salve said that Pakistan did not even inform of the arrest and they had to find out through media reports. If you remember, just last month, the Pakistani military court sentenced him to death, sentenced Jadhav, and that is why India felt that they needed to escalate this, saying it is an urgent situation, a matter that is getting grave, and bring it to the international level. Padma, we heard what India had to say. We heard Harish Salve a few hours ago presenting their case. How confident or how strong do you think what Harish Salve had to say will resonate as opposed to what Pakistan is about to say? Pakistan, from what we're hearing, is going to play up the confession about the espionage activities. How solid do you think what India's case will be enough to sort of have India be sympathized with regards to what Jadhav and prove him innocent?
Well, I think Harish Salve is a superlative lawyer, a superlative advocate. So he made a very strong argument and a very clear argument. So I'm sure the Pakistanis have an ace team, along with them. But there's been much emphasis on the fact that their team is larger, that they have a European lawyer. I don't see all that as relevant at all. Frankly, I think, as I said, this is a very clear-cut case. I cannot see a single court of justice in the world saying to a country, yes, go ahead with with a death sentence to a man on whose hands there has been no actual blood proven.
Right.
You know, I mean, he could be a spy. He could have done the worst things. He could have, you know, tried to sort of, I don't know, smuggle weapons, whatever, you know. But then there isn't. This is not a case for a death sentence. So unless the Pakistanis, you know, have something else up their sleeve by which they now come up with fabricated terrorism charges, you know, that he allegedly killed so many people, which I think is highly unlikely. And even if they did, they'd have egg on their face because they would be coming out with that kind of absurd allegation at a very late stage.
All right. Let me now go over to WION's correspondent Aisha Sindhu standing by. Aisha, you were there presenting and hearing in from India's side when all of this unfolded earlier on this afternoon. Any moment now, we will be listening into the Pakistani side of all of this. As we reported just a few moments ago, Pakistan saying that they're calling him now a terrorist. So very strong allegations there. India saying that they had requested consular access for Jadhav but were rejected by Pakistan 16 times. So quite a bit of a interesting juxtaposition between the two South Asian neighbors. What are you picking up from the latest editorial lines at this point?
Absolutely, Archit. In fact, if you look at it, you know, on paper it seems rather simple. India is approaching the International Court of Justice simply on a violation of the Vienna Convention, saying that Jadhav was not allowed consular access. He didn't have legal counsel till very late into the proceedings against him before the pronouncement or the death sentence was announced on him. So. And also, just going off of what Padma said, this case is very interesting because if you look at where Jadhav was allegedly picked up, it is Balochistan. Now, Taha Siddiqui, our WION's bureau chief in Pakistan, pointing out that Balochistan as a province is already sort of locked out when it comes to the media. So there's no real way of independently analyzing or figuring out what exactly Jadhav was doing there, what were these supposed links he had to organizations, you know, dealing with subversive activities against the nation of Pakistan. So the case itself seems to be on sort of on shaky grounds, and India very categorically, by approaching the International Court of Justice, has seemingly called Pakistan's bluff. They've caught Pakistan on the back foot. Let's not forget that Harish Salve moved to the Netherlands very quickly once it was ascertained by India on credible reports that there is a chance that Pakistan might just go ahead with that sentencing very soon. So Harish Salve approaching the court when it was actually in recess. The court wasn't even functioning, but it took him just 20 minutes for him to put his case forth to the ICJ, and for the ICJ to decide that the sentencing needs to be held, and secondly that this process needs to be initiated at the earliest. So as Padma was pointing out a little while earlier, what the jurisdiction, what the outcome of this proceedings or these hearings is going to be remains to be seen. But when it comes to saving face on the diplomatic front, let's not forget this is a big diplomatic win for India because it has forced international attention to Pakistan and has caused it to, you know, come forward. What it is going to be doing in a few minutes from now, it's called the right to reply. It does have to furnish a sort of response to the accusations that India has made. So really speaking, it's an interesting time when it comes to how the globe is looking at the South Asian region. And let's not forget, Pakistan has constantly been called out for its, for being a harbor, a haven for terrorist organizations,
right,
with terrorists moving openly on the streets of Pakistan. So keeping all that in mind, this is definitely a shot in the arm for India. How the fallout of it, which remains to be seen, is going to be equally interesting.
All right, let me now go back to a senior international correspondent Padma Rao standing by here in the studio here in New Delhi. Padma, you know, quite an interesting line of events that's unfolding, certainly putting India and Pakistan back on the international spotlight yet again. How will this impact, a Navy officer, the military angle of all of this, giving to the extent to which India is going to support a naval officer?
Yeah, well, you know, speaking of the military and the Navy, I just wanted to take us all back to the trial of Ajmal Kasab, you know, who was a terrorist, who was who was trained by the Lashkar-e-Taiba, supported and infiltrated into India with the help and the knowledge and the connivance of the Pakistani army, right? Now, the Pakistani officials have refused to give Indians consular access to Jadhav, and that is in violation of his rights, outlined under a particular article of the Vienna Convention. But India, on the other hand, had allowed Pakistani High Commission complete access to the Kasab trial and had even allowed this murderer who had murdered people, slaughtered civilians in full public view. They had allowed him to write and approach the Pakistani ambassador, the High Commissioner, for help and for assistance. So, you know, there is a huge difference. And also, let's not forget, there was no, India and Pakistan were not officially at war when 26/11 happened, and yet Ajmal Kasab was not tried by a military court, but he was tried as any other criminal by a court, a civilian court.
Right.
And he went through the entire gamut of court procedures before he was finally awarded the death sentence. So, you know, there is a huge discrepancy there. But having said that, you know, I mean, frankly, I'm quite cynical about there being you know, democratic civilian procedures in place in Pakistan, because it is, as we've repeatedly said here, ruled by the armed forces, you know, practically. So it's always the army has the last word.
All right, let's also get perspective on why India rushed and moved this to the international level, the International Court of Justice. Just in the last few hours, we heard India's take, spending about 90 minutes presenting their side. Pakistan's side, any moment now, will take the stage at The Hague. The decision to, in fact, appeal to the court was taken in a rush. It followed intelligence reports saying that Pakistan was getting ready to hang Kulbhushan Jadhav. The government rushed senior lawyer Harish Salve to The Hague. In about 20 minutes, Salve then briefed the registrar. Now, these details continue to emerge about why India pushed for getting this at the international level at the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. And it appears that all of this came out, as we mentioned, because of intelligence reports, and a very interesting perspective on how all of this unfolded. Again, both sides about 90 minutes to present their sides. India going first to present its side, Pakistan any moment now taking the stage. Salve's point really was that Pakistan had broken the international diplomatic rules by rejecting India's request for consular access. In fact, saying 16 times Pakistan denied access for Jadhav. He also requested the ICJ, Salve that is, the president, to use his powers to order Pakistan not to execute Jadhav, worrying that all of that may unfold before the court even comes down with some sort of a verdict. And such an order is binding on all parties. Now, if Pakistan had gone ahead with the execution, the Security Council would then have to take up that matter in the court. The court was convinced, and the order staying Jadhav's execution was issued. Again, a live look at visuals coming in there. We'll cut into that as soon as we hear from the Pakistani side, taking about 90 minutes. So probably any time now till about 8 o'clock New Delhi time, when Pakistan, from what we're hearing, will present its side as arguments about Kulbhushan Jadhav, from what we're hearing, saying that they will play up his confession and use that to their advantage, spending the 90 minutes or so to talk about why they believe their decision to execute the naval officer is correct for allegedly conducting espionage and sabotage activities. We see Harish Salve there walking in there, so any moment we could see the Pakistani delegation there coming in. Of course, as we see that, we will, of course, cut back into it. Let me go back quickly to Padma Rao. How do you think India presented itself? You know, we heard them this afternoon. We haven't heard Pakistan yet. We do know they're going to talk about the confession, from what we understand. Do we think India did whatever they could to sort of exonerate Kulbhushan Jadhav, at least from what we heard?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt, excuse me, of Harish Salve's credentials, you know,
right,
and his capability and his professionalism. I mean, he is one of the top lawyers of this country. So he has made he's done a very neat job and presented the case very, very forcefully and very succinctly. But, you know, it remains to be seen whether, what sort of, whatever sort of an argument Pakistan delivers now. The whole point is, you know, what I'm trying to say, Archit, is that the, you know, world attention and cases decided or not decided at the International Court of Justice seem to be largely ruled by bilateral considerations and the consideration and the thought, what's going to be in it for me?
Right.
You know, so you will have situations where you know, there is a certain decision taken by the ICJ, and you have a country within the big five of the Security Council which ultimately overrules or has the power to overrule anything the ICJ says, that will have some sort of a bilateral consideration, you know, over the person, the state of the person who's been condemned, or the state that has been condemned. and excuse me, and that will determine ultimately where this case goes. So I really think, and I'm repeating that I think the reason why India went to the International Court of Justice is not because India is naive, as everybody knows that. And I think that the India decided to call their bluff and say, right, you know, we're going to internationalize this. And we know that when you internationalize any thing concerning India and Pakistan, the mood of the moment is such, the flavor of the year, the flavor of the century, if you like, is India, and for many, many other reasons which are unconnected with the trial, for good, bad or indifferent. So it's bound to be, and everybody knows Pakistan is the epicenter of terrorism. Can't be a coincidence that there are, you know, terrorists popping up everywhere, that somehow all roads lead to Pakistan when you actually, you know, find out. Now this, just to come back to the fears expressed very recently that, you know, Jadhav may be executed even before this trial is over. I mean, given that, you know, some of these trials have been languishing in the ICJ for 20 years, you know, that wouldn't surprise. I don't expect a verdict today or tomorrow. Having said that, you know, it's quite likely. I see where that fear comes from, because I wouldn't put it past the authorities in Pakistan to say, oh, we were transferring Jadhav from point A to point B in a van, and unknown assailants, you know, terrorists came and sort of attacked him, and we, in order, you know, as a clumsy attempt to prove that Pakistan is also a victim of terrorism, as they've started saying of late, you know. So that wouldn't surprise me. So I think the fear or the apprehension that he may be killed even before the trial is done is not entirely unfounded, because you know, this is not exactly a country with a very clean track record.
Sort of playing, you know, better be safe than sorry to kind of, you know, escalate that situation.
Yes, or to just simply blame it on someone else, an unknown assailant, a terrorist, the same terrorists that, you know, that that Pakistan sees itself as a victim of also, you know, but the same ones that they nurture and harbor themselves.
Absolutely. Let me now go over to Aisha Sindhu, who's standing by gathering information as we speak. Again, you're taking a look at live visuals inside the courtroom at The Hague, the International Court of Justice. Any moment now, the Pakistan side will present their case for about 90 minutes. Again, Aisha, you know, India has never approached the International Court, at least with regards to Pakistan, since more than 40 years, I believe 1971, but the government saying it really did not have a choice because the life of an Indian citizen is at stake. So a very interesting turn of events, you know, rushing this and escalating this to the international level. Again, 11-judge bench to listen in now to Pakistan's defense. From what we're hearing, Pakistan to play up the confession that Jadhav made. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this pans out. Of course, we've already heard India's side. How do you expect, you know, from what you're picking up, Pakistan's side to sort of play out? What's the mood that you're picking up on sort of both sides of the border?
Right, Archit, in fact, just going off of what Padma said, you know, it's very apparent at this point that India has gone ahead and called Pakistan's bluff. You mentioned it yourself, it's been decades since India has taken Pakistan to the ICJ. So it just goes to show that India understood, you know, the threat to its citizen and decided to step in. And as far as Pakistan's entire strategy going to this case goes, it's fairly apparent that they're going to go, you know, using the same confession tapes, or the supposed confession tapes, to try and push their case forward. We also are given to understand that they are going to talk about India harboring terrorism and sort of switching, turning the tables, if you will, to try and make India appear as if it were a nation that sponsors terror. That has, remember, been one of the constant refrains we've been hearing from Pakistan since the Prime Minister Modi brought up Balochistan from the ramparts of the Red Fort on Independence Day last year. But just also to, you know, remind our viewers, Kulbhushan Jadhav did serve with the Indian Navy at some point. However, what he was doing in Iran was in the capacity of a retired civilian. He was no longer associated with the Indian Navy, as many other officers of the military establishment have done so. In fact, I think we're going to cut across now to those live proceedings.
Let's listen in, absolutely. We're listening in right now from The Hague.